They called it the Great Silence. For 300 years, humanity had been the galaxy's favorite pet project. The Galactic Council had swooped in just as Earth's children took their first steps beyond their solar system, offering protection, guidance, and a place among the stars. But pets, the Council learned too late, can develop very sharp teeth when they grow up neglected and hungry. The mistake wasn't in uplifting humanity. The mistake wasn't in assuming they would stay grateful forever. When the message reached every corner of known space simultaneously, broadcast on every frequency in every language, impossible to block or silence, it contained just 7 words that made entire civilizations tremble. The children of Earth are coming home. The galaxy had exactly 72 hours to remember why apex predators were never meant to be kept as pets. Admiral Zexai of the Dominion Fleet had lived through 4 galactic wars and the collapse of 2 star empires, but nothing had prepared him for the sight before him. The massive view screen of his flagship displayed what should have been impossible, a human fleet emerging from quantum-fold space at the edge of the Kepler system. Not just any fleet. This was a war machine that defied every tactical manual in the known galaxy. "Sir," his communications officer whispered, her normally steady voice cracking, "we're detecting over 2,000 ships. Each one is larger than our largest dreadnought." Zexai's forearms trembled as he gripped the command rail. 300 years ago, when the Galactic Council had first encountered humanity, their largest vessel had been a crude metal box barely capable of reaching their own moon. The Council had taken pity on them, offering them technology and guidance in exchange for their compliance with galactic law. Humanity had accepted graciously, settling into the role of eager students and grateful recipients of advanced civilization. They had been so very, very wrong about what humanity truly was. The fleet hung in space like a constellation of death. Each ship bore the same symbol, a blue marble crossed by silver wings, with a sword thrust through its center, the symbol of Earth United, an organization that officially didn't exist according to every galactic database. "Open a channel," Zexai commanded, his voice steadier than he felt. The response came instantly, as if they had been waiting for his request. The view screen shifted, and Zexai found himself staring into the face of a human woman. She appeared young by their standards, perhaps 40 of their short years, with silver streaking through dark hair and eyes that held the cold fire of someone who had seen too much death. "Admiral Zexai of the 9th Dominion Fleet," she said, her voice carrying across the void with perfect clarity.
"I am Fleet Admiral Sarah Chen of Earth United. We meet again."
Zexai's blood ran cold. He remembered that name, that face. 30 years ago, she had been a young captain, one of several humans allowed to serve in the Galactic Defense Force as a gesture of inclusion. She had been brilliant, tactically gifted, and completely loyal to the Council's vision of galactic peace. She had also been present at the Battle of Proxima, where the Council had made their greatest mistake. "Admiral Chen," he managed. "You were reported dead at Proxima. The entire human contingent was listed as casualties when the rebellion was suppressed." Her smile held no warmth. "Suppressed. Is that what you call the systematic execution of every human officer who questioned why we were ordered to fire on civilian evacuation ships? The murder of 3,000 humans who thought they were serving the greater good?" The bridge fell silent except for the steady hum of life support systems. Zexai remembered Proxima differently. The official reports had spoken of a tragic accident, miscommunication during a complex operation. But looking into Chen's eyes, he began to understand that the truth had been buried along with the human dead. The Proxima incident was investigated thoroughly, Zexai said carefully. The loss of life was regrettable, but regrettable. Chen's voice cut through his words like a laser blade.
3,000 humans died because we refused to murder civilians.
Your investigation concluded that we were casualties of war, collateral damage in the service of galactic stability.
But some of us survived, Admiral.
Some of us made it home to tell Earth exactly what the galaxy thought of human life. Behind Chen, other figures moved into view. Humans in uniforms Zexai didn't recognize, carrying weapons that hummed with energy signatures his sensors couldn't identify. But it was their faces that truly frightened him. Each one carried the same expression, the cold, patient fury of predators who had been caged too long. Earth withdrew from galactic affairs after Proxima. Chen continued. We told the Council we needed time to grieve, to process our losses. The Council was very understanding. They offered condolences and promised to do better, They gave us space to heal. Her smile grew sharper. They gave us exactly what we needed. 3 decades of uninterrupted preparation. Zexhay's tactical officer leaned close to whisper urgent updates. The human fleet was not just massive, it was impossible. Their ships showed energy signatures that exceeded anything in the galactic database. Their shields registered as impenetrable barriers that seemed to bend space itself. Most terrifying of all, their weapons were charging, and the energy readings suggested they could crack planets. "What do you want?" Zexhay asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Justice," Chen replied. The Council sentenced humanity to irrelevance. They decided we were too dangerous to be trusted with real authority, too primitive to understand the complexities of galactic civilization. They made us their pets, their token junior partners, while ensuring we could never threaten their precious order. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of an entire species' rage. "But pets learn, Admiral. They watch their masters. They discover weaknesses. And sometimes, if their masters are very, very stupid, pets grow teeth." The space around Zexhay's fleet suddenly filled with new contacts. Smaller ships, moving with impossible speed and agility, surrounded his formation like sharks circling wounded prey. They had appeared without warning, without any sensor signature until the moment they chose to reveal themselves. "Stealth technology," his science officer gasped. "Complete sensor invisibility. Sir, they could have been watching us for months, years, and we would never have known." Chen nodded as if she had heard the whispered comment across the void. 30 years, Admiral. 30 years of Earth's best minds working on a single problem. How to remind the galaxy that humans are the descendants of apex predators. We studied every species in the Council, learned every weakness, every fear. We discovered that most galactic civilizations have forgotten what it means to fight for survival, because they've lived in safety for too long. She gestured, and the view screen split to show tactical displays. Red icons marked Council fleets throughout the galaxy, all surrounded by blue human forces that had somehow appeared without detection. Every major military installation, every Council fleet, every world where our people died serving your vision of peace. We are everywhere, Admiral, and we have been for longer than you can imagine. Zexhay felt his heart racing as the scope of the human operation became clear. This wasn't a raid or a revenge strike. This was a perfectly coordinated galactic-wide offensive that had been years in the planning. Humanity had spent 3 decades preparing for a war the Council didn't even know was coming. "The Council will negotiate," he said desperately. "There's no need for violence, whatever grievances you have." "Grievances?" Chen's laugh was sharp and humorless. "You think this is about grievances? This is about survival, Admiral. The Council made it very clear at Proxima that human lives are expendable in service of their greater good. They demonstrated that we exist at their sufferance, to be used and discarded as they see fit." She leaned forward, her eyes boring into his through the screen. "But the Council forgot something important about humans. We're the only species in this galaxy that evolved from persistence hunters. We're the only ones who learned to chase prey until it collapses from exhaustion. We're the only ones who developed the patience to spend generations planning revenge." The human fleet began to move, their massive ships flowing through space with a grace that should have been impossible for vessels of their size. Energy readings spiked as weapon systems came fully online, and Zexhay realized with growing horror that his flagship's defensive systems were already being overwhelmed by targeting arrays that seemed to anticipate every evasive maneuver.
"You have a choice, Admiral," Chen continued.
"Your fleet can surrender and be escorted to a neutral world where you'll be treated according to the galactic conventions you helped write. Or you can fight and discover why the rest of the galaxy forgot to fear humans." Zexhay looked around his bridge at officers who had served with distinction in dozens of conflicts. They were some of the finest military minds in the Dominion, experienced veterans who had never known defeat. But in their eyes, he saw the same thing he felt in his own hearts, the recognition that they were facing something completely beyond their experience. The humans hadn't just built a fleet. They had built a war machine designed specifically to hunt and destroy every military force the galaxy could field. 30 years of careful study and preparation had created an enemy that knew every weakness, every tactical doctrine, every technological limitation of their opponents. And they had done it all while smiling and nodding and playing the role of grateful junior partners in galactic civilization. "Sir," his communications officer spoke urgently, "I'm receiving reports from across the fleet. All ships are being individually targeted by multiple human vessels. They're reading our shield frequencies, our power distribution patterns. It's as if they know our ships better than we do. Chen nodded again. We do. Every piece of technology the Council gave us, every tactical manual you shared, every training exercise we participated in, it all helped us understand how you think, how you fight. You taught us everything we needed to know to defeat you.
The terrible irony of the situation hit HFY like a physical blow. The Council's generosity, their attempts to include humanity and galactic civilization, had given their future enemies a complete understanding of every weakness in their defenses.
The humans have been the perfect students, learning not just technology and tactics, but the fundamental psychology of every species they might one day face in combat. We were trying to help you, he said quietly. No, Chen replied, her voice gentle for the first time. You were trying to control us. There's a difference, Admiral, and it's one that cost 3,000 of my people their lives. The Council never wanted partners. They wanted pets. Dangerous pets that could be useful when controlled, but pets nonetheless. She paused, her expression shifting to something that might have been regret. The tragedy is that it didn't have to be this way. Humanity would have been happy to serve as equals, to contribute to galactic civilization as true partners. But the Council made it clear that humans are only acceptable when we're subordinate, grateful, and willing to die for causes we're not allowed to question. The human fleet continued its advance, and HFY realized that surrender was not just inevitable. It was the only option that wouldn't end with the complete destruction of his forces. The humans had planned for every contingency, prepared for every possible response. They had turned the galaxy's own knowledge against it, transforming 30 years of careful teaching into 30 years of intelligence gathering. Admiral, Chen said, her voice carrying a note of finality. Your time is up. What's your decision? HFY looked one last time at his officers, at the ships of his fleet, at the tactical displays, showing impossible odds. Then he turned back to the screen and made the only choice that offered his people any hope of survival. We surrender. The words echoed across the bridge, and he could feel the weight of history settling around them. This was the moment when the galaxy learned that humanity was no longer content to be anyone's pet project. This was the moment when the children of Earth finally came home. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in chaos. Representatives from dozens of species filled the great chamber on Centauri Prime, their voices rising in panic as reports flooded in from across known space. Human forces had appeared simultaneously at every major council installation, presenting surrender ultimatums with clockwork precision that spoke of planning so extensive it defied comprehension. Council Prime Yatesh, a towering crystalline being whose species had led the galaxy for over a millennium, struggled to maintain order as the chamber erupted in accusations and demands for action. The holographic displays surrounding the central podium painted a picture that every representative understood but none wanted to acknowledge. Humanity had achieved total strategic dominance in less than 72 hours. Silence. Yaches's voice resonated through harmonic frequencies that could shatter glass, finally bringing the chamber to grudging quiet. We must approach this crisis with the wisdom that has guided our council for millennia. Panic serves no one. Senator Korath of the Balani Republic, her scaled features flushed with indignation, rose from her seat. Wisdom? Prime Yatesh, the humans have demonstrated capabilities we didn't know existed. They've surrounded our homeworlds with fleets that appeared from nowhere. How do we apply wisdom to a threat we completely failed to anticipate? The truth of her words hung heavy in the chamber. For 300 years, the Council had prided itself on maintaining galactic stability through careful surveillance and control of emerging technologies. They monitored every species, tracked every advancement, and regulated every military development. The idea that one member species could develop such overwhelming superiority in secret challenged the very foundation of their civilization. The humans withdrew from active Council participation 30 years ago, noted Advisor Helios, his gaseous form shifting nervously within its containment field. We interpreted this as a natural response to their losses at Proxima. Perhaps we should have investigated further. Investigated what? Snapped General Vrex, his insectoid mandibles clicking with agitation. They submitted all required reports. Their technology assessments showed normal progress within acceptable parameters. Their military remained within treaty limitations. By every measure we used, humanity was progressing exactly as expected for a junior member species. The bitter irony wasn't lost on anyone present. The Council's own oversight systems had been turned against them. Humanity had learned to game the very mechanisms designed to keep them under control, presenting an image of compliance while secretly developing capabilities that made a mockery of galactic military doctrine. A new voice cut through the discussion, clear and cold despite its artificial origin. Every being in the chamber turned toward the human section, where Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood beside a holographic projector that had activated without permission. Council Prime, she said with formal courtesy that somehow managed to sound like a threat. I bring greetings from Earth United and an invitation to dialogue. Vasquez had served as Earth's primary representative for 15 years, always respectful, always cooperative, always carefully deferential to the Council's authority. But something had changed in her bearing. She stood straighter now, spoke with confidence rather than deference, and her eyes held the same cold fire that had burned in Admiral Chen's gaze. Ambassador Vasquez, Yatsesh, responded, struggling to maintain diplomatic protocol in an utterly unprecedented situation. The Council demands immediate explanation for your species' unprovoked military actions against sovereign member worlds. Unprovoked, Vasquez's smile was sharp enough to cut steel. Prime Yatsesh, I believe you may want to review your historical records before making such claims.
But I'm not here to debate the past, I'm here to discuss the future.
She gestured, and the holographic display expanded to show a detailed map of galactic civilization. Red zones marked areas where human forces had established dominance. Blue zones showed regions still under Council control, and yellow zones indicated contested space.
The visual impact was devastating. Humanity controlled nearly 60% of strategically important locations. As you can see, Vasquez continued, the situation has changed dramatically.
Earth United now possesses the military capacity to enforce our will throughout the galaxy. But we're not interested in conquest for its own sake. We have specific objectives, and we're prepared to negotiate their achievement. Council Prime Yatesh's crystalline form pulsed with patterns that indicated deep distress.
What are your demands? Accountability, Vasquez replied simply. 30 years ago, the Council authorized the execution of 3,000 human officers who refused to fire on civilian evacuation ships.
The official investigation concluded these deaths were an unfortunate consequence of military operations. We demand a new investigation with full access to all records and testimony from survivors. The Proxima incident was thoroughly reviewed, General Vrex began. By Council investigators who had already decided the outcome, Vasquez interrupted. We have evidence that contradicts the official findings. Evidence that suggests the human contingent was deliberately placed in an impossible situation to justify their elimination. The chamber fell silent. The Proxima incident had always been a sensitive topic, one of the few blemishes on the Council's otherwise exemplary record of peaceful conflict resolution. But if the humans possessed evidence of deliberate wrongdoing, even if such evidence existed, Senator Korith said carefully, the appropriate response would be to present it through diplomatic channels, not military intimidation. Vasquez's expression hardened. Diplomatic channels? Senator, humanity spent 10 years after Proxima requesting hearings, demanding investigations, pleading for justice through every diplomatic avenue available to us. We were told repeatedly that the matter was closed, that pursuing it further would damage galactic stability. She paused, letting the weight of that revelation settle. So we stopped asking nicely. We spent the next 20 years preparing to ask again, from a position of strength. Today is that day. The tactical implications became clear to every military mind present. Humanity hadn't just built a war fleet, they had built leverage. The massive show of force wasn't intended to conquer the galaxy, but to force a conversation that the Council had spent 3 decades avoiding. What exactly do you expect to accomplish? Advisor Helios asked, his gaseous form swirling with anxiety. Even if your interpretation of events is correct, those responsible for Proxima are long dead or retired. Justice for historical grievances cannot undo the past. No, Vasquez agreed, but it can prevent the future.
Prime Yadath, in the 3 centuries since humanity joined galactic civilization, how many junior member species have faced situations similar to Proxima? How many times has the Council decided that the greater good requires expendable lives from species deemed less valuable than the core members? The question hung in the chamber like an accusation. Everyone present knew the answer, though none wanted to speak it aloud. The Council's vision of galactic peace had been built on an unspoken hierarchy that placed ancient, established civilizations at the top and newer species at the bottom. It was a system that maintained stability by ensuring that costs were always paid by those with the least political power. You're talking about restructuring the fundamental basis of galactic civilization, Council Prime Yadath said slowly. No, Vasquez corrected. We're talking about making it live up to its stated ideals. The Council claims to value all sapient life equally. We're simply requesting that policy match rhetoric. She gestured again, and the display shifted to show detailed proposals for governmental reform,
military integration and resource distribution that would genuinely treat all member species as equals rather than maintaining the current system of senior and junior partners. These reforms would destabilize centuries of progress, General Vrex protested. The current system exists because it works. Galactic peace has been maintained for over 1,000 years precisely because clear hierarchies prevent the chaos of competing ambitions. Peace for whom? Vasquez asked pointedly. General, your species has never been ordered to fire on civilians. Your officers have never been executed for refusing immoral orders. Your worlds have never been strip-mined to fuel the industrial needs of your betters. The peace you celebrate has been very selective in its benefits. The truth of her words created an uncomfortable silence. The Council's record of maintaining peace among senior member species was genuinely impressive, but that peace had often been purchased with the suffering of junior species, who lacked the power to resist exploitation. Senator Corrith attempted a different approach. Even accepting your grievances as legitimate, surely this level of military response is disproportionate. You've essentially held the galaxy hostage to force a political discussion. Have we? Vasquez's smile returned, but this time it held something that might have been amusement. Senator, please review the tactical reports from our fleet positions. You'll note that while we have demonstrated overwhelming force, we have not fired a single shot. No worlds have been bombarded, no stations destroyed, no civilian populations threatened. We've simply made it clear that we now have the capacity to defend ourselves and enforce our legitimate interests. Your fleet could destroy entire star systems, General Vrex pointed out. Yes, Vasquez agreed simply. Could. The question is why you find that fact threatening. After all, several Council species possess similar destructive capabilities. The crystalline hegemony alone could sterilize half the galaxy if they chose to. Difference is that you trust them not to abuse such power because they're part of your inner circle. You fear us because we're not. The psychological insight cut deep. The Council's real fear wasn't human military capacity, it was human independence. For 3 centuries they had controlled humanity through a combination of technological dependence and political subordination. The sudden revelation that humans no longer needed Council protection or approval represented a fundamental shift in galactic power dynamics. Council Prime Euthesia's patterns shifted to deeper, more complex configurations that indicated intense deliberation. As the eldest being present and the ultimate authority in Council proceedings, the decision of how to respond rested with them. Ambassador Vasquez, they said finally, what guarantees can Earth United provide that these reforms will not lead to destabilization or conflict among member species? The same guarantees the Council has always provided, she replied. Our word, backed by our demonstrated capacity to enforce it. The difference is that now we're asking to be trusted as equals rather than managed as children. And if the Council declines your proposals, Vasquez's expression grew solemn. Then humanity will withdraw from galactic civilization entirely. We'll establish our own sphere of influence with species that choose to join us on equal terms. And we'll defend that sphere against any attempts at forced reintegration. The threat was implicit but clear. Humanity now possessed the military capacity to carve out an independent empire that could rival the Council's authority. They were offering cooperation as equals or promising competition as adversaries. You're asking us to choose between accommodation and war, General Vrex said bluntly. No, Vasquez corrected. We're asking you to choose between evolution and irrelevance. The galaxy has changed, General. The question is whether the Council will change with it or be left behind by it. She gestured one final time, and the holographic display showed timeline projections for both scenarios. Cooperation promised continued prosperity and expansion of galactic civilization with humanity as a true partner. Conflict promised decades of destructive warfare that would benefit no one and might shatter the careful peace the Council had spent millennia building. You have 24 hours to decide, Vasquez announced. After that, humanity will proceed with our preferred option regardless of Council approval. As the implications of that ultimatum sank in, the chamber erupted again in urgent discussions and desperate strategy sessions. The comfortable old order was crumbling, and everyone present understood that their decision would reshape the galaxy for centuries to come. The children of Earth had indeed come home, and they were no longer content to be anyone's pets. 6 months after what historians would later call the Great Awakening, Commander Sarah Martinez stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Unity Station, watching as ships from dozens of species conducted joint training exercises in the space around Zentara Prime. The sight would have been impossible just a year ago. Human vessels flying in formation with Council fleets, sharing tactical data and coordinating maneuvers as genuine equals rather than junior partners under supervision. The transition had not been smooth. The Council's 24-hour deadline had passed intense negotiations that stretched for nearly a week before Prime Yatesh finally announced their decision to accept humanity's proposals for governmental reform. The announcement had triggered the largest shift in galactic politics since the Council's founding, sending shockwaves through established hierarchies and forcing every species to reevaluate their position in the new order. Not everyone had been pleased with the changes. "Commander," Lieutenant Zhang reported from the communications station. "We're receiving a priority transmission from Admiral Chen.
The hegemony fleet has reached the Outer Rim territories." Martinez nodded grimly. The crystalline hegemony had been the most vocal opponent of the reforms, arguing that humanity's demands would lead to chaos and the collapse of galactic civilization. When the Council voted to implement the new equality measures, 3 senior species had withdrawn from active participation, establishing what they called the Traditional Alliance in the galaxy's outer regions. The alliance claimed they were preserving the true spirit of galactic civilization against human contamination.
In practice, they had become a rallying point for every faction that preferred the old system where power flowed from ancient lineage rather than current capability. Their withdrawal from Council space had been accompanied by increasingly aggressive rhetoric and disturbing reports of how they treated species that disagreed with their position.
"Any word from our intelligence assets?" Martinez asked.
"Yes, ma'am.
The hegemony is definitely mobilizing for military action. They've been recruiting disaffected elements from across the galaxy, promising to restore the proper order once they've dealt with the human problem."
Martinez permitted herself a small smile. The hegemony's leaders still thought in terms of the old paradigms, where military action meant massive fleets meeting in predictable battle lines.
They had learned nothing from humanity's demonstrations 6 months ago, apparently believing that the Great Awakening had been a fluke rather than a preview of humanity's true capabilities. "Open a channel to Admiral Chen," Martinez ordered. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the bridge of humanity's flagship. Admiral Chen looked older now, the weight of command having added new lines around her eyes, but her gaze remained as sharp and determined as ever. "Sarah," Chen greeted her informally. The old military protocols had been relaxed as humanity had taken on its new role as a leading member of galactic civilization.
"I assume you've seen the intelligence reports about the Alliance buildup."
"Yes, Admiral."
"Are we proceeding with Operation Vindication?" Chen's expression grew solemn. "The Council has given final approval. Prime Yatesh believes that allowing the Alliance to establish a rival power base would eventually lead to full-scale galactic war.
Better to deal with the problem now while we can contain it." The irony wasn't lost on either woman. Humanity had fought for equality within the galactic system, but their first major action as true Council partners would be to defend that system against species that rejected human participation. The revolution that had begun with demands for justice was about to be secured through the very military superiority that had made it possible.
"What's the tactical situation?" Martinez asked.
"The Alliance has assembled nearly 800 ships at Kepler Station," Chen reported.
"Mostly hegemony crystalline dreadnoughts with support elements from the Vrex Empire and the Korath Republic's Old Guard. They're using it as a staging area for what their communications suggest will be a direct assault on Zentara Prime."
800 ships, Martinez mused, impressive by old standards. "Ancient standards," Chen corrected with a slight smile.
"They're still thinking in terms of the last galactic war 3 centuries ago. Massive formations, overwhelming firepower, traditional tactics. They haven't adapted to the new realities any more than they've accepted the new politics." The tactical display updated to show the Alliance fleet's disposition. It was indeed an impressive sight. Hundreds of enormous vessels arranged in the classic battle formations that had dominated galactic warfare for millennia. Each ship represented centuries of technological advancement and millions of hours of construction. By any historical measure, it was a force capable of conquering entire star systems.
Against humanity's evolved military doctrine, it was a target-rich environment waiting to be eliminated. "Admiral," Lieutenant Zhang interrupted, "we're receiving a transmission from Alliance Command.
They're demanding to speak with a senior human officer present." Chen and Martinez exchanged glances.
"Put it through," Chen ordered. The screen split to reveal General Vrex, his insectoid features twisted with obvious rage. Behind him, Martinez could see other Alliance leaders, crystalline beings whose forms pulsed with agitation, scaled reptilian faces filled with contempt, and gaseous entities swirling with hostile energy. "Human admirals," Vex spat, his mandibles clicking rapidly. "You have 48 hours to withdraw your forces from Council space and return to your pathetic little world. The Traditional Alliance will not tolerate your contamination of galactic civilization any longer."
"General Vrex," Chen replied with perfect politeness, "I'm afraid that's not possible. Humanity is a full member of the Galactic Council. with the same rights and responsibilities as any other species. We cannot withdraw from our own civilization. Your civilization? The crystalline being beside Vrex flared with indignant light. Humans have existed as a spacefaring species for barely 3 of your centuries. We were building interstellar empires when your species was still discovering fire. What possible right do you have to remake a galaxy you barely understand? Martinez leaned forward. The same right any sapient species has, Hegemon Coxtal. The right to exist as equals rather than servants. The right to have our voices heard and our interests respected. The right to defend ourselves against those who would deny us those basic dignities. You speak of dignity while holding weapons to our throats, General Vrex accused. Your entire ascension is built on military intimidation and the threat of violence. No more than yours was, Chen replied calmly. The difference is that we've been honest about our capabilities from the beginning. We didn't spend centuries building secret fleets while pretending to be peaceful scholars. We have never hidden our strength, Hegemon Kextal protested. Haven't you? Martinez asked. Tell me, Hegemon, how many junior species knew about the crystalline hegemony's planet cracker weapons before humanity revealed their existence? How many of the Council's minor members were aware that you possess the capacity to sterilize entire star systems? The silence that followed was telling. The traditional alliance's moral authority was built on the same foundation as the old Council system. The assumption that senior species could be trusted with overwhelming power, while junior species could not. Humanity's crime wasn't possessing dangerous weapons, but possessing them without permission from their supposed betters. The situation has become clear. General Vrex said finally, this galaxy is not large enough for both our visions of civilization. We will settle this the traditional way, through trial by combat. Winner takes all. General, Admiral Chen said with genuine sadness. That's exactly what we hoped you wouldn't say. She gestured, and the tactical display updated again. The Alliance fleet at Kepler Station was suddenly surrounded by red contacts, human ships that had apparently materialized from nowhere, outnumbering the Alliance forces by nearly 3-1. But these weren't the massive dreadnoughts that had shocked the galaxy 6 months ago. These were smaller, sleeker vessels that seemed to flicker in and out of sensor contact like hunting sharks. Stealth frigates, Chen explained conversationally. Each one carries enough firepower to cripple a traditional dreadnought with shield technology that makes them effectively immune to conventional weapons. We've had them positioned around every Alliance installation for the past month. The scope of the strategic disaster became clear on Vrex's face. Impossible. Our sensors would have detected. Your sensors detect what we allow them to detect, Martinez interrupted. General, your species built their military doctrine around the assumption that warfare required massive, visible displays of force. You never considered what could be accomplished by predators who prefer to hunt in shadows. This is not honorable combat, Hegemon Kextal protested. No. Chen agreed. It's effective combat. Honor is a luxury for species that don't face extinction. Humanity learned that lesson at Proxima, when our officers died honorably for principles that their supposed allies didn't share. The Alliance leaders conferred among themselves in rapid, agitated conversation. They had spent months preparing for a traditional battle, gathering their finest ships and most experienced commanders for a decisive confrontation that would settle galactic leadership once and for all. Instead, they found themselves surrounded and outgunned by an enemy that refused to fight by their rules.
What are your terms? Vrex asked finally. Unconditional surrender. Chen replied immediately. All Alliance military forces will be disarmed and interned. All Alliance leaders will submit to Council justice for violations of galactic law.
All Alliance territories will be returned to Council administration under the new equality protocols. And if we refuse? Chen's expression hardened.
Then we will demonstrate why apex predators became the dominant species on Earth. General, you've seen what humanity can accomplish when we're trying to avoid casualties.
You really don't want to see what we can do when we're trying to maximize them. The threat hung in space like a physical presence. The Alliance had expected a war of grand gestures and noble sacrifices, a glorious struggle between competing visions of galactic civilization. Instead, they faced the cold reality of being outmatched by opponents who had spent 30 years learning to kill more efficiently than anyone else in the known galaxy.
You would commit genocide to maintain your political position? Hegemon Kextal asked, his crystalline form dimming with horror. We would commit whatever acts are necessary to prevent a return to the system that murdered our people. Martinez replied quietly.
The difference is that we're giving you a choice. Surrender and live under the new system as equals, or fight and discover why humans became the most successful predatory species in galactic history. The tactical display updated once more, showing weapon signatures as the human stealth fleet powered up their armaments. Energy readings spiked beyond anything the Alliance sensors had ever recorded, painting a picture of destructive potential that dwarfed their own considerable arsenals. General Vrex looked around the bridge at his fellow commanders, seeing his own recognition reflected in their faces. They had underestimated humanity not once but twice, first by assuming they would remain grateful subordinates forever, then by assuming their military capabilities were merely advanced versions of traditional technology. They would not survive a third underestimation. "We surrender," Vrex said, his voice barely audible. Admiral Chen nodded solemnly. "A wise choice, General. Your crews will be treated with respect and dignity under the galactic conventions. Unlike some species, humans honor the surrender of defeated enemies." As the Alliance fleet powered down their weapons and submitted to human boarding parties, Martinez reflected on the strange journey that had brought them to this point. Humanity had begun as supplicants, grateful for any place in galactic civilization. They had evolved into students, learning everything their teachers were willing to share. Finally, they had transformed into apex predators, using their accumulated knowledge to reshape the galaxy according to their own vision of justice. The old order was gone forever, replaced by something new and uncertain. Whether that change would prove beneficial would depend on humanity's ability to wield their newfound power more wisely than those who had come before. But for the first time in 3 centuries, every species in the galaxy would have an equal voice in determining their collective future. The children of Earth had come home at last, not as returning pets but as adult equals ready to take their place among the stars. The galaxy would never be the same. It was too late to fix their mistake. The galaxy watched humanity strike back, HFY.